Good morning. I'm almost moved to sing a chorus of "Oh Happy Day" because we have been looking forward with great anxiety to the end of this convention. But I think we're pleased, and we'll give you a chance to give your comments in just a minute. But to let you know that this convention is just one in a series of efforts that we're doing, and part of the background of the convention was that we would let people around the world know what Atlanta's trying to do. And one of the things we're trying to do is to generate jobs. In spite of all of the success we've had in terms of bringing in new investment and generation of jobs, we still have almost a third of our population that's under the poverty line. Many of those are working. Many of those are underemployed. But Councilman Jabari Samama has, along with several members of the City Council, is introducing legislation that I would like to let him take a few minutes to describe that will help us address some of our continuing unemployment problems. Councilman Jabari Samama.
Well, good morning, and I am very happy that you came out this morning. All week long, you have certainly been entertained by our mayor, and I think we all can agree that we have the greatest mayor, if not one of the greatest mayors in any city in the United States. But we certainly have a great city council as well, and I'm very happy in behalf of City Council to be here just to talk to you a little bit about one of the bills that I am working along with a couple of my colleagues. We also have Council President Marvin Arrington over here, and I'd like to acknowledge his presence here this morning, and it's always good to be in his company. As you know, in the city of Atlanta, we do have the traditional separation of governments. We have the executive represented by the mayor and the legislative branch represented by council. We have a very good working relationship here. And as a counselor, I am very concerned about putting forth legislation and developing policies to work on some of the essential problems that we confront as a city. And it's out of that context that I began to do research about a year ago on the question of unemployment and underemployment in Atlanta, and to fashion a policy aimed at impacting that situation. In the city of Atlanta, there are approximately 18,000 individuals who are without work. And this number does not reflect those who have got, who are no longer looking for work in the marketplace, but it reflects the actual number of individuals who have applied for work, who are available for work, but who cannot find work. In addition to that, about 24% of the families in Atlanta are legally poor, and that translates to somewhere in the neighborhood of 150,000 people. I believe, and I don't think that I have to do much convincing to establish the fact that there is a link between unemployment and crime. We have, as in many major cities throughout the United States, a major problem with drugs, theft, and other violent crime that's generally associated with unemployment. So I think the city has a unique opportunity now to leverage itself, to leverage its resources, to try to do whatever it can within its power to eliminate unemployment. So it's out of this background and out of this need that I have developed an ordinance which is called the First Source Jobs Ordinance, and I'll describe real briefly how it works. But prior to doing that, let me just briefly explain where it is. The policy was introduced in the Human Resources Committee back in October. I spent from October to approximately March of 1988 perfecting the legislation, doing research in the other cities such as St. Louis and Boston and Portland, Oregon, cities that already have similar policies in place. The policy passed the Human Resources Committee in the month of March. It passed the Executive Committee shortly thereafterwards, the Community Development Committee after then, and then it had one other hurdle, and that was the committee which could put the money in place for the positions. That's the Finance Committee, and I'm happy to report that it was reported out of the Finance Committee last week with a favorable recommendation. So there's only one other hurdle that this policy has to cross before it becomes city policy, and that's council as a whole this coming Monday. And we do expect approval of this policy at the council meeting, which takes place this Monday. The policy primarily targets unemployed or underemployed groups, economically disadvantaged, the handicapped, high school dropouts who've been out of school for 6 months or longer, teenage parents, senior citizens, and other individuals in society who have been displaced because of jobs moving on to other areas or something of that nature. So those are the target groups that will be affected by this policy. Policy essentially says that any organization, any business which receives any type of city subsidy, whether it be in the form of a community development block grant or a UDAG grant or a guaranteed loan or a construction grant, will have to hire from a register of underemployed individuals. And the goal is to fill from this register approximately 50% of the entry-level positions. This policy will affect any organization which receives economic assistance of $25,000 or more, and any organization that has 15 employees or more. The policy will be implemented by the city's Private Industry Council, and it will be enforced by the city's Contract and Compliance Office. To the question of whether or not the policy has teeth, the answer is yes. The penalty for non-compliance could range from withholding of up to 10% of the funds to disallowing the organization out of compliance from bidding or for competing for any other city funds in the future. That's essentially the policy and how it works. Right now, we're in the stage of identifying a consultant who will identify the number of jobs which will be affected over the next 2 or 3 years. This consultant will also identify the types of training. Training is very, very key to any kind of effective jobs program. So this program does have a jobs component, and we have a consultant, or we will have a consultant, we will hire a consultant to give us some idea of the types of training that will be needed. And let me just say this in closing. As you're all aware that we're in a booming city. I mean, you've been through the city all this week and you've seen the development going up downtown, and you see the excitement and the energy in this city. Despite the fact that we have this boom and development and all this activity and this energy, we still have a serious problem of poverty. We have a unique opportunity right now to link the development with the resolution or attempt to resolve some of the basic problems of poverty. It's going to require imagination on part of the city, and it's going to acquire this kind of what I call city leveraging that we're trying to do. I think that if we can make this policy work in this particular area, we can perhaps duplicate the same kind of scenario in other areas, whether it be housing or whatever the case. One last thing, too, as it relates to the private industry. You may very well say that, well, this policy will only affect those organizations who are coming after public money. How are you going to have that great of an impact when you've got a large private sector out there that won't be affected? Well, you're absolutely right. But what we're going to attempt to do once we implement this program, which will impact those groups that are coming after public money, is to promote this policy and to ask that all private industries voluntarily cooperate with us. So it's my desire, and I don't think it'll be very difficult to sell once successful, is to ask that all private organizations, all private industry, whether they're seeking city funds or not, to voluntarily fill their entry-level positions through our first source register. And I believe that in the spirit of cooperation that has characterized our relationships in the past, that they will cooperate, and that will be able to have a dramatic impact on our situation here. So those are my comments, and that's the policy. And now, Mr. Mayor, I guess we're open for questions. Guess I covered all the bases. Thank you very much.
In getting our city together, we've had a remarkable level of cooperation throughout the city. And I'd like the president of the city council to come forward and just briefly express himself in relationship to the way our city workers and the whole city has responded. Marvin Arrington, the president of the city council.
I just simply wanted to say we had a great week. Just to see so many friends and visitors and delegates from across the country to come into Atlanta, and we could truly show our southern hospitality. I think this put Atlanta further on the map beyond the year 2000, the many contributions that we've made. Didn't have any complaints about taxi cabs, the hotel industry, police officers. There was one incident where a protester asked a local police officer, "What do I have to do to get you to arrest me?" And the guy said, "I just want to be nice to you. And I'm not going to let you do this, but we don't beat up on folks. We just kind of say, go your particular way." And that was the attitude that was conveyed throughout the city. So I'm just pleased that we did have a great convention. And maybe we can have them back in 4 years once we recapture the White House, which we're going to do in January with the Duke and with the Vice President. So, Mr. Mayor, we had a great week.
Good.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Any questions? Come on, if you'd come to the mic and identify yourselves, we'd appreciate it. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm Larry Register with CNN. I have a couple of questions for you.
Good.
When this thing first started, there was a conception, both local and national, that Atlanta couldn't pull this off. How do you respond to those criticisms now?
I just laugh. No, the truth of it is that this is a big task, and it was a big task. And it required a maximum amount of organization, cooperation from the public sector, from the private sector, from the city council, from individual citizens in their homes. I think when we started off Sunday with about 2,000 volunteers greeting people at the airport, Sunday afternoon we had 50 state parties where people at their own expense and in their own homes, entire neighborhoods entertained state groups. And from there on, we were just on a roll. And I agree with what Marvin said. The stories, I did not get a single complaint. And I was walking through the hall. One lady said that she wanted me to write me a letter about the fact that our horse-drawn carriages don't have any regulations. And she really thought that when the temperature gets over 90 degrees, we should not have the horses pulling, that it's too hot for the horses. And I didn't ask her where she's from. I appreciate that advice, but and I will have our zoologist check into it. But folk have been plowing mules in 110-degree heat down here as long as I can remember, and I don't remember ever hearing a mule drop dead because of the heat. But maybe, well, I promised her I would look into it, but that's the only concern that I've heard expressed.
I realize it's just the day after. Could you summarize briefly any feedback you may have gotten from the DNC delegates or Democrats as a whole?
Well, I was with about 200 of the Finance Committee this morning for breakfast, and I had a number of the big money raisers in the Democratic Party come up to me and say, I've been in every convention since Los Angeles in 1960, and this is the best convention that the Democrats have ever put on, and we owe it all to Atlanta. Now, I appreciate that. I frankly don't think we deserve all the credit, though. I think that something is happening in the Democratic Party. I think Paul Kirk began to try to get the Democratic Party 4 years ago to realize that if you run an election as differing factions competing for control, you always lose. That only as you run as a party can you win. I think that the speakers of the South, led in part by Governor McWhorter of Tennessee, who is a former Speaker of the General Assembly in Tennessee, and Speaker Tom Murphy, and the speakers in Texas and Florida that came together and put together the Super Tuesday process, were basically saying we have to be involved in the process of selecting a nominee. And I think that's one of the reasons why we have this balanced ticket. For the first time in the history of Georgia, I talked to one of the old-line Roosevelt Democrats from Georgia, and I asked him if there was ever a time in his knowledge that the governor, the speaker, both senators, the entire Democratic congressional delegation, the county courthouse crowd, and the mayors were all enthusiastically behind a national ticket. He said it had never occurred to his knowledge, and he's over 80. I think that brought a kind of spirit here. Now, the citizens of Atlanta, I think, fit in perfectly, and I wish I could take the credit for it. We've done some significant things with the Atlanta Ambassadors Program with the taxis. I think our hotels do a very good training job. Delta Airlines is known around the world for its hospitality. But what it was a kind of everybody just remembering their home training and their upbringing. And it was Southern hospitality and good common human courtesy at its best. But it even went further than that. Two stories that I've heard. One of a man who said he got out of the cab, and in paying the cab driver, he dropped two $20 bills in the floor of the cab. And the cab driver saw it and chased him down to give him the money. And he was coming up saying, you know, he's from New York. And he was just wondering what we do to get this kind of honesty and integrity amongst the citizens of a city. Those are the kinds of things that I think really will pay off in the future for our city. And I think maybe now we can feel a little better about ourselves, that a lot of the criticism about the city not being ready was coming from people in the city.
I have one final question. If you could grade yourself on an A to F basis, what grade would you give yourself and the city of Atlanta?
Well, I would give us all straight A's. And I don't have any reservations about, there's nothing we could have done that would have made this convention any better, other than having built a 72,000 seat dome stadium 2 years ago instead of in the next 2 years.
Thank you very much.
My name is Bill Lisinski. I'm from the Tampa Tribune. You go a long ways back with Reverend Jackson. Was the Jesse Jackson that came here to Atlanta different from the one you knew then? And how do you assess his future?
Well, I think there was quite a different Jesse Jackson, but it was a Jesse Jackson that is maturing and realizing the tremendous potential that I saw in Jesse Jackson in Selma in 1965 when he came down there as a student. All of the abilities and talents were there. He was the edges were a little rough. He was a little more brusque and impetuous. The Jesse Jackson that came here is a real statesman and a real pro who can do almost anything he wants to do in politics. He's going to be a very valuable asset to this country. And he can almost determine his own role. And his future and potential is unlimited.
Morning, Monica Guy with WSB-TV. About the Dome Stadium, you were saying that could have been one thing that we could have had that would make this convention gone a little smoother. Do you think that it's something that the city needs to definitely get on now so that we will have the capacity to hold big crowds?
Well, I think the city council will consider the legislation which will extend the 1% hotel motel tax beyond the time of the Democratic Convention. And the city will also in that agree that half of its 5th cent will be assigned to the stadium. And that vote will come up in the next couple of weeks. I am very hopeful about it. I think that we'll never have another opportunity to get 70% of the revenues paid on a facility like this. And I think we desperately need it. I think it can be accommodated without seriously impacting Vine City. I wish I could give the same prognosis for your father's church. But in terms of rerouting traffic, in terms of dealing with those specific problems, I would look forward to working with all of the churches and with that entire community so that the traffic flow and the development and the parking can accommodate the stadium with a negative impact, with negligible impact on the community.
One final question. As you were saying yesterday, that if nothing else, Atlanta's gotten a lot of free publicity around the world every day this week. What do you expect long term for the city? Do you expect investment to come flooding into the city?
Well, I do. And Coleman Young was saying that they're still receiving benefits from the Republican convention 8 years ago. The delegation from New York credits having the 1976 convention in New York with turning around New York. And that sort of coincided with the I Love New York campaign. And New York has restored its investment climate since 1976. Our investment climate was always very good. I expect this, though, to keep it going almost at the same pace for another couple of years. And I would hope that we have received the kind of good coverage around the world that will make the International Olympic Committee realize that we're the kind of folk that can really put on a party. Of all of the buttons, the one I liked the best was the one that said, "Atlanta loves a great party." And that's true of the Democratic Party, but it's also true that I was at the Marriott Marquis as a breakfast this morning, and Ted Renner was saying that they have 1,000 people checking out today from this convention, but they've got another 1,000 checking in today for the weekend. We are a convention city. We will have more than 2 million convention visitors here a year. We're in very serious competition with many other cities in the world. People can go anywhere with their conventions and with their money. And in order to get them to come here and keep our hotels full and to keep our people working, we have to continue day in and day out to do the kind of outstanding job that all of our city employees, our Fulton County employees, our state employees, and that's from the top level administrators that worked out all of the details of putting this convention together, the street workers, the environment and streets that prepared and maintained the streets of the city and cleaned them every night after the demonstrations were over, so that you got up in the morning and the city was looking fresh and new. It's the State Highway Department that got the downtown connector together in a beautiful way. Everybody did their job. The private sector that contributed to the planters all along, the Peachtree planters all along Peachtree. But most of all, it was the individual courtesy of the citizens and employees of all of Atlanta that made this convention such a tremendous success.
Do you have any idea of city overtimes right now, how much money the city spent this week in overtime?
No, I don't, but again, that's another one of the beauties of it. The people whom we were serving in the overtime are paying for it. That much of the overtime is going to be paid by our involvement in Atlanta 88. And so the $15 million that was budgeted for as our contribution to the convention, which comes from the hotel motel tax, will take care of most of our overtime. There's other overtime that we budget for, because remember, as I said, every week we've got a big convention. Now, we don't have the 15,000 journalists, but we didn't have but 4,000 delegates, and maybe another 4,000 support, 5,000 support personnel. I guarantee you we will have more than 10,000 visitors in this city next week for something. I don't even know what. The week before the Democratic convention, we had 2 religious conventions of about 20,000 each. So our city workers and our Southern hospitality really is very important to it's our lifeblood. It employs about 81,000 people. And one of the things we've learned is that every 1% increase in hotel occupancy creates 400 jobs. So that when you get hotel occupancy up 10%, that's 4,000 jobs. There's some whole cities that have not generated 4,000 jobs in a year. And the kind of job that we've done in this convention has bound to increase hotel occupancy.
My name's Jim Galloway. I'm with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. First of all, you set aside time every morning just to go over the clips and review a little bit of the videotape. What is your impression first of the print coverage out of town, and what is your impression of the video coverage?
Well, no criticism intended, but the print coverage out of town was better than the print coverage in town, and the print coverage in town was great. I think the Atlanta newspapers really became world-class newspapers in this convention. And in terms of reporting, it was good, straightforward reporting, but in every out-of-town newspaper I saw, we were getting rave reviews. And you all know we're good, so you don't rave over us anymore. But I didn't see a bad story, and I only heard of one negative video clip, which was basically a misunderstanding and misinterpretation of Atlanta, and was factually an error. That was Andy Rooney commentary.
Did he call you?
No, he didn't. He didn't call anybody because he didn't know what he was talking about.
He called Jerry Bartles. I had to apologize. I was just wondering if he called you.
Oh, no. Maybe it was just, now I didn't see it, but he has a way of doing those kind of tongue-in-cheek sort of things. And I think we've got to we've got to be mature enough to handle that without getting thin-skinned. And I wasn't upset about it at all. I frankly don't mind a little negative publicity because it keeps the whole debate going. We do have problems. Thank goodness they didn't show up seriously this week, but everywhere we potentially had a problem is something that's not going to go away, that we're still going to have to deal with. I guess I've apologized to almost everybody else. I probably should apologize a little bit to Marta, though, and the union for not having any disruption and disturbance. But I still think that's one of our vulnerabilities. We've got to find a way to have a better working relationship so that we don't come down to the wire and find ourselves under the gun on some of these problems.
Second question, well, second and third question, they may be related. Do you think the hype about the direct economic impact was a little bit overblown? And what would you do? Is there anything in this whole convention process that you would have done differently had you did it?
Well, I don't think the direct economic impact was overblown. I think it was misdirected. I think they probably spent more than this $50 to $60 million. But it wasn't, but we made the assumption, many of us, myself included, that it was going to be spent in the hotels and in the restaurants and in the stores. I don't think we spent much as Democrats in the restaurants. I know we didn't. And I don't know how much shopping people did. I do know, though, that they probably spent that much money. The hotel bills plus the electronics. The amount of money that was spent in putting together all of the wiring. There's $50 million worth of wiring in the Georgia World Congress Center. You know, I mean, if you look at all of that, the electricians made off like fat rats. And the telecommunications technicians. And so we didn't think about that. We thought maybe the entertainment industry would make more than it did.
Any second guessing of yourself? Or the office, or the whole process?
No, you know, we didn't have a dissenting vote in the entire life of Atlanta 88. Every vote that we took in the last 2 years has been unanimous. We have operated by consensus. We had the chamber, we had the governor, we had the Fulton County Commission chairman, and the state party chairman, John Henry Anderson. And Bobby Kahn and his crew did a great job with Atlanta 88. There were anxieties with Don Fowler representing the Democratic National Committee. But I don't remember a single, I don't remember even a single shouting match. You know, I mean, there was nothing much to disagree over.
Well, since you brought it up, one of the more important things that's happened, at least in terms of Georgia politics in this campaign, is the fact that Joe Frank Harris is getting behind Governor Dukakis. Do you think the way in which Atlanta decided to host this committee, the convention, via Atlanta 88, having Joe Frank Harris and the state government contractually involved, do you think that helped?
Oh, no question. It's the only way to do it. This could not have been an Atlanta convention. We had to have the help of Joe Frank Harris, and that meant the State Patrol and the GBI. And I can't praise our law enforcement community too much. The fact of their presence and the manner of their presence just made things safe and secure for all of us. And there were some people who came here Sunday with the intention of taking over this town and disrupting the convention. And they were not able to do it. And we owe a great debt of thanks to the law enforcement community for that, and for doing it very well with only one questionable incident. And when we looked at the tapes, I think most people would not even question the way they handle that. Yes.
Pat Modoc with the Gwinnett Daily News, Mr. Mayor. On that question, the question frequently covered this week, were the police prepared for the large and unruly demonstrations the city experienced on several occasions, and was, in response to those incidents, was unnecessary force used?
Was unnecessary force? Let me say that we were not prepared for the unruliness of the first day's demonstration. We're prepared for big demonstrations, but we've not had demonstrators that deliberately set out to do violence and cause trouble. Once we understood that that was the intent of one group of demonstrators, we brought out the troops that were sitting. The troops were always there. They just were not deployed. Normally, it's better not to have a big, visible, too big and visible a police presence. And we thought at the state capitol, 20, 30 officers should have been enough. And it would have been enough, except that there were about 200 people that wanted a confrontation that would have led to violence. So we negotiated our way out of that. And then I think from that time on, we had a big visible police presence. And we had little or no trouble after that.
Jeff Kunert with the Orlando Sentinel. I know that you said that you didn't talk to any delegates on the floor that had anything negative to say. I talked to a lot of them that were locked out of the Omni that said that it was a mistake to come to Atlanta, and that they were going home with a bad feeling. And I want to know if you could give me an assessment about what kind of a black eye, if any, that gave.
Well, I don't know. I think that given a choice, we erred on the side of safety. And what I think happened to most people was when they couldn't, and it happened to me, when we couldn't get into the hall because it was full, rather than be jammed in the aisle or standing out at the hot dog stand where you couldn't see anything, we went to the Georgia World Congress Center where there were over 100 hospitality suites. And there must have been another 15,000 people in the Georgia World Congress Center every evening. And I don't know that you can find any place that we could have had the convention where you had both of those opportunities present.
Well, the complaint, though, that I was hearing was from delegates saying that I'm supposed to be in there and voting and I can't vote. I was elected to come here, that kind of thing. Following up,
every state delegation was told what time the convention started, and they were urged to be there on time. And it was only those people who got there very late. And all I'd say is they should have been on time.
One more. The Republicans meeting in New Orleans are basically contending that the conventions of the future are going to be held in big stadiums like the Superdome. That the facilities are basically accommodate the crowds that you couldn't accommodate here. And I wanted to ask you whether you feel that the only cities in the future going to be running for conventions are going to be those with large stadiums.
I would say that would be true of Democratic parties, but I think after this election you'll be holding Republican conventions almost in telephone booths.
You won't get another Democratic convention if you don't have its own stadium here?
No, we probably won't. I think we will probably have big conventions, but and we have a lot of big conventions, but this kind of big media event we would have done much better in a dome. But one of the things that we were anxious about is that when you got 15,000 seats, or say 12,000 seats, and 15,000 people, or say 20,000 people, you've got a problem. But you've also got a problem when you got 70,000 seat stadium and only 20,000 people in it. Now, I suspect the Republicans are going, I don't know how many people they're going to fly into the Superdome, but it's going to be, unless they cut the Superdome way down in size, it's going to look empty most of the time. And I hope you all will pan around just to see what's going on there. Can you come to the mic in a minute after this? Thank you.
Ab Jones, WXA TV. If you had to do the convention over again, what would you have done differently?
I may have moved into a hotel room instead of sleeping at home every night. I think the only thing I would correct is the amount of sleep I got. Everything else went great.
What about convention planning? Would you have done anything differently as far as security or organizing the demonstrators, anything like that?
No, I don't think so, because I think that that until it's, you know, you find that you really need, I mean, I think we got on a situation in time. It never got out of hand. It required us canceling a demonstration, and it gave us a few anxious moments, but it never was out of control. So I think I'm glad it happened early, before the convention got started, and I'm really proud of the way the police handled that particular situation.
How many arrests were made during the convention week, and why did you get locked up if you were told what time to be in?
Well, let me say that I was trying to make arrangements and trying to be present at as many of these parties as I could, and I had press commitments, and actually with that many journalists in town, one of the big frustrations is having somebody to talk to and trying to get them to write help them with their stories. And I just got there late. And I went on over to the World Congress Center and probably enjoyed it a lot more. The arrest, I would say the last count I had yesterday was about 150. There may have been some later on. I think yesterday's count was 132 at the clinic, and there were 18 at the Environmental Protection Agency. And I don't know whether they made any arrest yesterday at all. Do you know, Roper? But I think that when people began to realize that they were going to be arrested courteously and that nobody was going to overreact, you know, it sort of, it wasn't news.
Could you characterize of the arrests you know about, I guess they are all serious, but the least serious and the most serious?
I don't think, well, I don't know. I think that most of those weren't very serious. They were people who were attempting to disrupt administrative services, one at a clinic and one at the Environmental Protection Agency. Mm-hmm.
Susan Moore with the Houston Chronicle. The bottom line about people getting locked out of the Omni, I think, was sort of that you had given out more passes than the Omni could hold. Why was that done? Didn't you anticipate that if you gave out more passes and the Omni would hold, that it might overflow and you'd have to shut down?
There were 2 or 3 reasons, and I don't know which was the dominant factor. One was I found out later that there were people who printed some false passes. And so
Were
you
they
notice,
selling those or
huh?
something? Were they selling
I don't know
those?
what they were doing, but you notice that the last 2 days we started looking at them under a kind of an infrared light. The other thing, though, is that there were a large number of service credentials. I saw one of our city employees, right down front last night. And I don't know what kind of credential he got or where he got it, but he was right in the middle of the delegates' operation and was having a good time. I mean, there's a certain aggressiveness of people wanting to be involved that enabled people to get in before some of the delegates did. I didn't mean to criticize the press, but for instance, the press credentials were supplied to both the roving correspondents and the technicians, I think, were the same. And so when people were not working, they used their credentials, particularly on the night Jesse spoke. They used their credentials to come in and participate.
Well, is that
Speaking from Houston, I think one of the things you might look to in 4 years is coding the press credentials.
Is that something you might do differently as far as this convention?
That's the Democratic National Committee. The city didn't do that. And we had very little to do with the credential process except to go by and pick up our credentials every day. But in all fairness, we were pushing the party to issue more credentials because particularly to the World Congress Center. But then once you got in the World Congress Center, people began to swap credentials back and forth. And that happens at every credential. I mean, at every convention where, 10 people go in and then they take off their credentials and one of them comes out with 9 and brings 9 more in. It's a routine that's occurred. We used to do that when we were demonstrators, getting people, not to get in to disrupt, but to get in to lobby. I think as long as you have a popular convention with issues at stake and people realize that you're likely to elect the next president of the United States and they decide they want to be there, there's some people that just are going to find a way to be there, no matter what you do. Let me thank all of you for your participation in these regular briefings. And let me say that I really and truly have been pleased at all of the coverage of this convention, and that a good part of the success of this convention is due to the press. And that is not only when you were praising us for doing something right, but when you were raising questions about things that we might have done wrong according to your analysis. And as you do your wrap-up stories and your stories for the future, just remember that for a city that was struggling along, threatening to be torn apart in the late 50s and even close down public schools, where there was little or no new investment in development, to have come where we've come in one generation is nothing short of miraculous. But we're not resting on our laurels, and we're not content, and we're going on to continue to solve some of our technical and infrastructure problems. Underground will be open the first of the year. The City Hall Annex back here with expanded press facilities will be open in December, some 6 months ahead of schedule, at least 6 months ahead of schedule. The expressway system will be completed by the end of this year, and we will continue to work on the kinds of problems of education, of unemployment, and we're looking forward to bringing the 1996 Olympics to the state of Georgia, and we'd appreciate you putting some mention of that in your stories. Thank you very much.